Hi friends! Today I'm going to be showing you some tips for how to make thin upstrokes. I get asked all the time on this channel for tips on how to make your upstrokes thinner, and so today I'm just going to show you a few tips that I use when hand lettering. So the first thing I want to talk about is that when you are learning to hand letter, if you have not done it before, it's just like another muscle that you are building up. So sometimes the problem isn't that your upstrokes are too thick, but rather that they get kind of shaky like this, and that's totally normal. That's just because you're building up that muscle, and as you practice, that will get better. I just wanted to mention that right away because sometimes that can be discouraging, but really, it's like if you were to go running and you come home and your legs are shaky. That's the same thing if you're all of a sudden writing a whole bunch when you're not used to it. You might just need to practice a little bit more so that your muscles aren't so tired as you're lettering. I do have a tip to use during that stage of lettering, but I'm not going to get too far ahead of myself, and I'm just going to start from the beginning here. So the first tip that I have is make sure that you're holding your pen at an angle. I know that a lot of you have noticed that I hold my pen this way, which is not the most normal way to hold your pen. A lot of you hold it this way, but the main point is that you are holding it at an angle. So we're not pushing straight down like this on our pen to get the thick, we're just using the side of the tip of the brush. So as we push down, it just pushes a little bit harder, and then as we push up, we get a thinner upstroke. So make sure that you're holding it slightly angled. Whether or not you hold your pen this way or this way, I don't think it really matters. I know that this is the proper way. I do sometimes letter this way, but honestly, I just have a lot more control over my pen when I put my thumb over. And that's just me personally, probably because I've been writing like that all my life. So when I try to switch it now, it just makes me lose a bit of control. So I personally write this way, but the most important thing is that you're just writing at an angle here. And the next thing that I want to mention is to try and use a more medium to small size brush pen. And by that, I don't necessarily mean the width of the tip of your brush pen, I mean the length. So as you can see, this is a Tombow dual tip brush pen, and these are pretty long. So these can be a little harder to control your upstrokes. It's definitely possible, but as a beginner, I know that some people do get frustrated with these pens. These are great pens and I really do like them, but I know from your feedback that these aren't always the most beginner friendly, so you might have better luck trying a smaller tipped brush. I have a couple that I'm going to show you. The first one is just this Zig Brushables pen, which is what I was using at the beginning, and I really like this brush pen. As you can see, it's just slightly shorter. It has a really similar look to the Tombow, but it's a little bit smaller, so you might find that this one is a little bit easier to control. I have also really enjoyed this, which is the Faber-Castell Pitt Artist Pen. This is in the size B, and this one is quite a bit smaller, as you can see. So something like this might be a little bit easier for you to control as a beginner. I'm just going to use this pink so it's a little bit easier to see. So something like this might be a little bit easier for you to control when you are going to get your upstrokes here. Just like before, I'm just holding it at a slight angle, and I'm just pushing down, and then I'm kind of letting it glide up. And then the last pen is this Pentel Touch pen. And as you can see, this is a very small brush pen compared to this, but I do find that this one's a little bit more forgiving than some other smaller brush pens that I've found. So you're going to get really thin upstrokes with this pen. But one thing I want to mention is that when you are working through having shaky upstrokes, like when you just need to build up that muscle, this one is going to show your shakes a lot more because it does get so super thin. You can almost get these like little hairline strokes with this one. So that's another thing that you can try if you're struggling with the larger tip brush pens, just to go down to like a medium or a small size brush pen and see if you can get a little bit more control over your pen that way. The next thing that I want to just quickly mention, I know I've talked about it a lot before, but that's using a quality paper. If you just use regular copy paper, you are going to get a lot of fraying on your brushes. So today I'm using the Kanzen marker paper, and I do often use and love the HP Premium Choice LaserJet paper, and I will leave links in the description box for all of these below so you don't have to remember them. And if you just use a regular copy paper, you're just going to get frayed brushes, and so when you're trying to transition from your downstroke back to your upstroke, it's just going to be a little bit more noticeable. And so you're going to have these things that kind of fan out here because my brush pen is all frayed. So I would definitely recommend investing just a little bit in a little bit nicer paper. The ones that I use are not super expensive at all, and you can even cut them in half for practice. But I would recommend doing that, especially if you're going to be spending money on brush pens. You really don't want them to get ruined immediately when you start using them. And they still might fray over time. I mean, brush pens don't last forever, but I do find that I get a little bit more use out of them when I use a smoother paper. So the next thing I want to talk about is the actual process of going from your thick strokes to your thin strokes. I think a lot of times the verbiage is used that you press really hard on your downstrokes and don't press quite as hard on your upstrokes, and that is true, and I know I say that sometimes too, but really it's actually more of just lifting up your pen completely and just letting your hand glide when you go up. Rather than pushing this hard on your downstroke and just pushing this hard on your upstroke, you're really just going to try to let your hand like dance back up when you're going up. So if I'm trying to just push really lightly, this is kind of what it looks like. But if I just try to let my hand glide up, it's going to be thinner than that. So rather than just trying to push not quite as hard, try to think of it as just letting your hand flow up as you go up. And look at, you can see those are a lot thinner, they're not quite as shaky. And I know this is really hard to describe, and I hope it's making sense, but it's honestly just like a letting your hand float up and then pushing when you go down. And letting your hand float back up and pushing when you go down. So I'm hoping that just a little mindset change will be helpful and you don't think I'm completely crazy. I hope that makes sense. But when you think of pushing up lightly, it's just really hard to get your mind to do that. So try to think of pushing down and then not pushing up at all, just dragging your pen across the top and then just dragging it again and then pushing down. And you may find that you achieve a little bit thinner and more natural, less shaky strokes than you were achieving before. And if you're struggling with this, one way is to just do a whole bunch of drills and just try to think of those gliding up as you go back down. You can do this, and you don't need practice sheets for these. You can just make your own designs as you go, but try to just practice that pushing and then gliding back up, and then pushing and gliding back up. And the last thing that I wanted to mention is that when you are working through building up that muscle and you're trying to get those upstrokes to be not so shaky, you might want to try using watercolors. I personally find watercolors to be a little bit more forgiving when it comes to your upstrokes, even if you are having a shaky day. Sometimes these are just a little bit more forgiving and they allow you to keep practicing without getting so frustrated that you can see all the little shakes and lines. I'm just using this Prima Watercolors Decadent Pies, but I use all kinds of different watercolors from just the regular palettes to the ones in a tube, and I always just think that they have a little bit more forgiving of a look to them, and they can cover up sometimes when you are having a shaky day. And of course, always think about if you've had a ton of coffee or if you need to eat lunch. Those are two things that definitely make me have shaky upstrokes. If I have had way too much caffeine or if I haven't had enough to eat that day, I will definitely struggle. But that is just my last tip for when you are working through building up that muscle and trying to get those upstrokes to not be shaky, because there is a difference between not being able to achieve thin upstrokes and just having shaky upstrokes. So if you can work on the shakiness first, it will be a little bit easier for you to then try to get really, really thin upstrokes. So I hope that was helpful for you. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments box below. And as always, thank you so much for watching and subscribing. We are almost up to 18,000 subscribers, and I cannot believe that because this YouTube channel is not that old. So I'm so excited to watch so many of you learn and practice your hand lettering. So if you haven't already, you can subscribe for more videos. And if you have any suggestions, please feel free to leave them in the comments box below. That's where I get so many ideas from you guys. So I really appreciate it so much. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.